Welcome, everyone. If you've been here all 3 nights, you'll notice something different right now. Does anyone out there notice anything different? Yeah, we switched places, so very observant. Good job. We're very glad to be here again. This is feeling a little bit like home away from home. It's nice to be here 3 weeks in a row. And we're going to wrap things up tonight, but just to do a little bit of review. We really began this series talking about the importance of putting our relationship and our marriage under the lordship of Jesus and how important that's been in our lives, not just as a couple, but individually. And as we grew in our married life together, and then as our family grew, to be conscious and aware of that. So what we want to do tonight is we really want to share with you a little bit about how we intentionally try to bring our children into a living, personal relationship with Jesus. And I think we all know this, but it's worth saying. You can offer and you can propose and you can lead them to the well, but only they can make that choice to drink and to say yes. And so we really are first and foremost cooperating with the Lord and with the gift of free will that He's given them to choose Him. And that's really been important for us to remember as we've kind of been on this journey together. So we're going to do a little tag teaming, and I'm going to begin. We really looked at our time of raising our kids as really understanding that our mission begins at home. And I want to say this especially because I think we are in a unique position of working for the church, working in ministry. And I think for us, there was a bit of a temptation to see the ministry out there and to see the mission out there. And I think in many ways, the Lord kept reminding us, your primary mission is at home with your family. And I remember as a young mother even, I had been doing, youth work since my conversion in college, and really was doing a lot of evangelization and traveling and speaking and doing things. And when I began to have young children, I was home more with my children as I needed to be. And Peter was still doing a lot of that. And I remember just feeling discouraged in a certain way, like, Lord, I want to be serving you. And I remember the Lord very clearly said to me one day in prayer, He said, if you convert the whole world and you don't give your own children the opportunity to meet Jesus, you've failed. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like, that's the primary importance to the Lord, is the mission and the primary mission He's given us at home. And that is something that's really stuck with me. So we've really seen our life together as we are the domestic church, a tiny little church, but we are the domestic church. And so what we've tried to do with our own family life, especially as our kids began to grow, was that we really wanted our relationship with the Lord to really orient our priorities, our goals, and our motivations for our children. And I just want to say that if we weren't consciously trying to do that each day through our own prayer, through our own dealings with our children, through our own husband-wife meeting and assessing it, they would be grown before we even got to doing it. So it's something that really does take a lot of attention and intentionality in order to be able to do it. So something I always often say, especially to moms as I'm talking to them about raising their daughters, especially as they get to, like 10 years old and then on up, is really challenging them to sit down sometime and write an honest list of your priorities for your children. What do you want most from them? And I think we can all say in some generalized way, I want them to be happy, I want them to know the Lord, but really drill down specifically, because that for us was the thing that began to drive the decisions that we were making for our kids in how they were spending their time and their energy and their talents. So we had to, I had to ask myself as a mom in particular, and I know Peter was asking the same questions of himself, is it success, happiness, love, good health, good friends, security, popularity, success on the sports field, academic success? What is it that we're looking to create in our children? All those things I mentioned are all good things, but they have to be motivated and subordinated to a greater goal. Otherwise, those things in and of themselves, especially as they get to junior high and high school, begin to dominate and take over just by sheer force of time, your life together. And you remember last time Peter told the story about kind of being asked to have our son be in football and really deciding to not have him do that because it was all dinner hours. So that was a way of saying, it's a good goal, but it's not our ultimate goal, is to have our son be, you know, this great football player. I remember the time, our oldest is a girl, Sarah, and I remember the first time for many things for her, probably because she was our first, but I remember when she went to the neighborhood school a few blocks away, and I remember the first time she walked home from the bus stop alone. And I remember the first time she got her license and drove home from school alone. I remember when she went to homecoming. I remember when the first time she went off to college and came home again, or when she studied abroad and came home again. And all I can think of in all those situations was getting her home and getting her home safely. And so what I want to say is the greatest goal of parenthood really is to help our children make it home safely to heaven, and to have that goal before us at all times. And I think it's easy to lose sight of this overriding goal and the ultimate destination, especially when we're in the midst of a busy, demanding life, or when we're in the midst of really difficult, stormy teenage years. So what we did was we began to ask ourselves, are we primarily investing our time, our money, our energy, and the things that will help our kids be better athletes, students, and more well-liked? Or are we investing in those activities, events, and relationships that can help them get to heaven? Sometimes those overlapped, and that was awesome. But sometimes we had to say, you know, assess by the scripture where your treasure is. There also will your heart be. And to really say we want to invest in the things that are really going to help them grow in their personal relationship with God and help them get to heaven. So that's a little bit about kind of the overarching way that we looked at it. And Peter's going to talk a little bit about very practically how we tried to make that happen within our home life.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. So we talked last week, first couple of weeks, about the great adventure. We really did try to look at raising children and family life as an adventure and a challenge, and one that we weren't doing by ourselves, but that the Lord was at the center of it. And I had to think about a transition because I grew up in a Catholic home where we never missed Mass. We lived a block from the church, but I never had a conversation with my dad ever about God, you know, or about his own personal faith. He lived it quietly. My mom prayed the rosary every day of our lives. She read scripture every day. But their generation in particular, it was like bad form to talk about it, you know, in different ways. And so I remember I had an uncle who used to go to Mass every morning, and he was a president of a bank, very successful guy. And I was in high school, and I asked Uncle Bob, I said, Uncle Bob, if he's ever shared what really motivates him, because you'd see him going to Mass at 8 o'clock in the morning and then heading to the bank, and everybody knew about his bank and his experience. And I said, have you ever shared anything about your own faith? He said, no. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I just live my life in different ways. I said, guess what, Uncle Bob? Total revelation to him. I said, Uncle Bob, you know what? Many young people would like to be like you, would like to be the president of a bank someday, would like to be this, that, and what makes you tick, they don't know, and they would like to know your story. And for him, it was like a complete foreign land. You couldn't do it, so it was private. Faith was private, basically, you know, in terms of not being able to share it. So what we did is because of our own experience in faith, and what happened to us was to say that, yes, faith is personal and it's individual, but it's not meant to be private. It's meant to be shared. So he said, let's just bring our kids into what we live and what we talk about, to just talk about our faith, to be able to talk about Jesus as somebody we know personally, that we grow, that we love. And so just speaking his name, I remember John Paul II said when he visited the United States many years ago, and then he wrote in the document to the churches in America, he said, America, you must learn again how to speak the name of Jesus. Just speak his name. And have his name be a part of your life. And that's really one of the things that we try to do. So we wanted our kids to be able to touch that. And we realized, we helped each other say, we can't lead them anywhere, because making disciples of your own children, helping form them, is you're leading them somewhere. But you can't lead them anywhere you're not willing to go or haven't gone yourself. You can't pass on to them something that you don't have. That's a really important thing. And so we kept saying, we need to really walk the walk together. And each stage of life has its different challenges and limitations, but you pivot. The Lord helps you, guides you in different ways to be able to make that decision. So the normal Christian living for us, what we tried to make, is for them to see who we actually were. That we didn't want to be able to keep it private. That's kind of a big deal. So that was one thing. Number two was, every generation you fight the Trojan horses. You remember the story of the Trojan horse? The Trojan horse is, what are the things that are actually in your house that are undermining what you're trying to do? Whether it's TV, wrong kind of music, all those kinds of things. We said, we have to kind of cleanse our house, so to speak. We need to say, are there habits, ways of doing, things that we're listening to that somehow undermine what we're trying to do and defeating ourselves right in our home? And so I've just got a book that I was reading recently. I really want to recommend this book to you, friends. It's called, by a guy named Jaron Lanier, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. He's a guy, he's not a Christian. He's not writing it from a Christian point of view. He was voted one of the top 20 Silicon Valley tech geniuses in the last 25 years. And he's part of a growing community of tech people in Silicon Valley who, former executives, high-end engineers, people who actually wrote the, what do you call those mathematical equations?
Algorithms.
Yeah, algorithms, and really brilliant people saying, we started out really wanting to do a lot of good for people and bring the whole world together, and my goodness, we're actually contributing to the destruction of the world, and we're getting people, we're looking at people and training them. They're like machines that we're teaching them how to live and teaching them what to like and what not to like, what to believe and what not to believe. It's a simple book, and it's very, very good. And this is a big Trojan horse. Why do I want to talk about it? Every executive, they said, and here he says, almost every executive they know in Silicon Valley send their kids to a school, I forgot the name of the school, no screens allowed anywhere, not computers, not phones, nothing. They don't want their kids looking at screens and being involved in it isn't that amazing when you think about it? It's crazy. Why do I bring it up here at this talk on marriage? Because number one, it's a huge Trojan horse. Lots of kids go to bed at night with their phones. And they're up at night, they're doing, we discovered it with one of our kids, I did, that he would be talking and texting and relating to friends in the middle of the night, that we had to get their phones out of the room and make the decisions and answer the why question for them. Why are we doing this? How does the decision we're making about this, how does this relate to our overall goal and purpose as a family? What mom and dad love and care about the most for you? And so that was a very important thing all the way through as well for us to work on, not just saying, don't do this, but can we answer the why question for them? I mean, if they don't get it at the end of the day, we still need to require them to do what they're going to do. But it's really helpful because that's I didn't have that experience growing up. It was just, you do it, it's your duty, and you didn't need to have your questions answered in the same kind of way. So, practical things. What we came to see was that it takes a Christian community. One person said it takes a village, right? But it takes a living Christian community to help us reach our goal. And so we had all along, we kept our eyes open to say, who can we partner with? Friends, ministries, schools, camps, you name it, where what we're trying to teach gets reinforced in ever-growing concentric circles. So they know we're going to do things the way the Herbecks do them, but they find out that it's just not, the Herbecks aren't the only ones who are doing this. So we do things like junior high camp. And why the junior high camps? It's a week away. We trust the people who are there, their vision, they're leading. Debbie's been leading a camp for many years, but it's a place of encounter. Every stage of life, help your kids encounter the person of Jesus at that stage. And get them into environments that correspond to that stage, their needs, their demands, their questions, their challenges, and make sure it's good people who can help you lead them and speak to them and help pass the faith on to them. But not just head knowledge, but a place where they can encounter him sacramentally, in confession, Eucharist, prayer, rosary, but also good preaching, sharing of life, sharing with each other. So that was important. Again, I think I mentioned in the past, we would love to cooperate with the Catholic schools. That was a change for me going in. I wasn't too convinced they were going to help us get to our goal in Ann Arbor, but it turns out they did. There were a lot of good changes and good leadership came into the high school, and I was able to say at the end of 4 years, I was giving a talk to all the faculty, you helped me raise my children. You helped me make disciples, and I'm really, really grateful to you for that, Debbie and I. And we did mission trips. We got the kids as they grew older to connect to, go with groups, good solid groups that are either going to go on an evangelistic type mission or something where you're serving the poor. We always thought about, we didn't exactly use the terminology, but it comes down to this. Love, charity, first commandment, second commandment. Charity of truth, that is where they hear the gospel, they hear testimony, they experience and encounter God, and the charity of bread, which is what? Caring for the poor, caring for people in need, giving yourself away for other people. Those things are really important, again, at age-appropriate levels to help them begin to engage that and to experience their life as one where they're giving themselves away. And that giving away is connected to where they come from, because they've watched us do it, and it comes from a life that they're living inside, the convictions that are growing in them in faith. What was really great, and if you can do it as parents, I'd really encourage you, whatever, camps or schools or whatever they get involved, that you're doing with your kids, get involved in those to the degree that you're able. Very grateful how much Debbie was able to be involved in the schools and volunteer time and be involved in the retreats and stuff like that. So it helped build bridges for the kids. We did mother-daughter, father-son things. One of the funnest things we did, we took, when one of my boys, Michael, was in 8th grade, we got 9 dads from his class, 9 boys, a couple younger brothers went up to Boyne Mountain for a weekend. 3 days we played football and we hit golf balls and we ran around. But every morning we began with prayer, all of us together. We did rosaries, we did praise and worship, and then we got the Bible out and we had conversations together with the boys just to normalize it into their life. They watch, they'll be able to do, it'll help them to see you doing it. And I think for dads, I want to just challenge any dads who are listening. My experience, and I've seen this all around the country and around the world in different ways, that men feel comfortable in a lot of environments that are very challenging, but many times men feel uncomfortable leading things spiritually. And they defer to their wives. And their wives carry it. It's both people should be engaged, and it's extremely important for dads to I want to encourage you to take baby steps if you have to, until you can get comfortable. Find other guys who are doing it with their families, learn from them, have them, coach you and encourage you and mentor you, because it's really helpful when both of you can be leading and you're not always just waiting for your wife to do everything. She'll handle all that. I'm foreign affairs, she's domestic affairs, she handles all that. Not when it comes to raising the kids and discipling them and forming them in different ways. Let's see. Oh, another big thing was we would try to help them, again, at different stages, usually by junior and high school, introduce mentors into their life. Old people who are just a little bit older than them, young girls or young guys who we know, who they could have a friendship with and they could be involved in their lives a little bit. They could come over to the house, be a part of our family, because it's amazing how much a 9th grade girl will be influenced and interested in a 12th grade girl more than she'll be interested sometimes in listening to her dad, believe it or not, And so these mentoring relationships, you can sort of shape those and think about them creatively, but they can be really, really good. I remember when we were talking about the whole dating thing, which I brought up a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week, and our first daughter was just getting into high school. We brought in a guy who's was he a senior? No, he had just graduated from Richard, was a year or two out of Richard. A really good guy who they liked and thought was super cool. And he came to the house for dinner, and we were talking, and we knew he had faith, we knew he was a serious young Catholic, and we knew he had made some really strategic decisions about dating when he was young. And he said one of the things he and some of his friends found out when they were freshmen, it's just the thing happens, and people would start dating, they'd pair off, and they noticed that Like if a guy and a girl sort of got infatuated with each other and they started dating, they'd go through it for a while and be super intense, and then 6 months down the road, something didn't work out, and the big breakup happened, right? But then they stopped being friends, and they couldn't relate to each other anymore. So these guys are really smart. I don't know who helped them do this, but they said, you know what? We like each other. A whole bunch of girls and guy friends, we like each other. We like being together. Let's make a commitment together to not pair off and seriously date, but let's be friends. They were friends like that all through high school. They switched on who they took to prom and who they took to homecoming, and they've been friends, some of them through college and even beyond. After they got married, they've been friends. Super healthy, super rare. But as he's telling this story, I mean, I'm not sure how much my kids were dialed in, but I tell you, as a dad, I was so happy that they were hearing and something that was a possibility for the kids that made total sense, that aligned with what we were trying to do as family members, because those relationships are really key for their spiritual journey, that those things get navigated in a healthy way. And you need help in being strategic in making that happen. We also had people live with us, we said, I think last time. So we had lots of different, Debbie and I, she underlined here to remind me, we did have lots of prayer together, lots of sleepless nights, she and I, wondering if the things we were doing were working, and if they're listening, and if they're actually taking it in, and if it's really in their hearts. But every once in a while, God is good. He gives you these little signs that, hey, something's happening in there, inside them. They're getting it a little bit, and this is sinking in for them. So, anyway.
Do you want to share the example of Michael being on his Kairos?
Oh, yeah. So
that's a good one.
My first son he's a introverted guy, he's a fantastic guy, but process everything inside, and in those days, everything stayed inside for him. And he never really shared much with his mom. On occasion was the only one he'd talk to about it, kind of his growing faith. But he got involved in Kairos, and he had a couple buddies in his life. One who was on the basketball team with him, who was a really good friend. And both this guy's parents were really, really fine people, but they weren't believers. But they wanted to send their child to the Catholic school because it was safe, it was a good education, and that sort of thing. And so they went on the retreat, the Kairos week, and he was praying for his friend during that time. And at one of the, I don't know what session it was, one of the nights, they have adoration, and they were all worshiping and in adoration, and Mike and his friends are there. Jim Rolfe, who's now a priest, Dan Westerman, who's now a priest, they were all in that class together, they were all in that group. And at the time, those guys were not ready for it, it's not like they were like all signed up for that at that point, But Mr. Mangan, the math teacher, led them through some good prayer and adoration. But at one point, I think Mr. Mangan grabbed the guitar, if I understood it right, and he was just leading in music, and most of the kids were gone, and these guys just stayed and were quietly praying, and my son was praying for this friend of his who was not from a believing family, that somehow he could come to know the Lord. He's just praying quietly, and as he's sitting there, all of a sudden, somebody comes and sits down next to him, and it's that guy. It's his buddy. And his friend asked him in that moment, basically in his own words, in his own language, how he could get to know the Lord, and how he could have a relationship with God like Mike and some of his buddies had. And so, you know how the kids write a letter home to the parents during Kairos? He wrote a letter home and he said, Mom and Dad, I want to thank you for all the prayer meetings you dragged me to and all the places you made us go, because something awesome happened here at Kairos. This friend came and sat next to me. He goes, when he asked me, I actually knew how to help him. And it was so fantastic. It was really great. And so a transition was happening. You could see the arc. It took a while for me to see it, but the arc was actually happening, Just stay with it. Just keep sticking with it and keep moving in it, and the Lord will help, So that was the story you wanted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's clear or not, from what we said before, we really tried to make our home base. And I think even more today with how much phones give everyone in the world access to our children, we wanted a place where everyone didn't have access to our children, where we could create the environment and establish the environment and direct the environment. And so our home, we had a lot of activity in our home, Friday and Saturday nights, either after a sporting event or just a hangout place for the kids. And that takes a certain amount of willingness to open your home up and say, our life now is about creating these environments for our children to bring their friends in so we can help manage those environments, rather than we're just sending them out not sure where they are, or what's going on out there, or whose home they're in, but we know they're in our home and we know who these young people are. And I think that was a tremendous blessing for us as parents, but also for the young people that we were able to minister to as they came into our home. So they just like to be in the Herbeck's house.
I think one other thing that I don't remember putting on the notes here, Deb, is we also as couples have support couples and friends that are in your life that you can talk to, because you're going to go through periods where you feel like, oh man, I'm just blowing it, or I'm not sure it's working, or I'm struggling, or I failed. And you can have other couples, both either mentor couples or just friends, that are sharing the journey together. You can talk to each other, you can pray with each other, encourage each other. And it's just a great way to grow in deep friendship, like real incarnational friendship in the parish with people who are on the same journey with you. And there'll be times you're laughing together, times you're crying together, times you're praying together, just as you're making your way through this. So another important piece.
So I remember being a young mom and feeling like, oh my gosh, the days are so long. When's Peter coming home for dinner? Or when is bedtime? And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're like, everybody's gone. It goes so incredibly fast. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't end there. Your job as a parent and a grandparent continues. And I think having the perspective of we have them for this short time that's very intensive, but what we're really trying to do here in our goal in getting them to heaven is to really build a legacy of love and faith that extends even beyond our own children. So that when they begin to enter into a life with their spouses and grow their own families, they're carrying on that tradition. And so the faith is being passed on from generation to generation. And we talk to so many parents and grandparents who are so heartbroken over the fact that their children no longer go to church, and now they're raising their own families outside the faith with really no faith at all. So I think that became more of an apparent thing for us as our kids began to leave home and began to date and seriously date and think about who they were going to marry. It's like, wow, we still have an ongoing responsibility here to see that the faith is passed on to the next generation. And so we had an interesting experience a number of years ago where we were invited to do a parish mission at Our Lady of Good Counsel, and it was a little bit of, Father John Ricardo interviewing us, and he said, why don't you invite one of your kids, your adult kids, to come, and maybe they can speak into some of what you did right or wrong or whatever. So we invited our most sensible child, which is our oldest daughter, Sarah, and he called her up and he said, Sarah, just tell me, what's the one thing that you remember about growing up in your home that you think has really impacted you to this day, and how you're trying to live your life as a young mother and as a married woman. And she said, I remember getting up in the morning to go to school when I was junior high and then high school, and every morning when I would get up to go to school, I would see my dad taking a prayer time in the living room. And what struck me about that, I think Father John may even said, well, do you remember anything they taught you? And she's like, I don't know, not really. Which I know she did, but the point is, faith is often more caught than it is taught. And the most important thing that we felt we could do is to be credible witnesses to our children. That Jesus is alive, that he's real, that we can have a personal relationship with him, and we're willing to invest everything we have for our own lives and for their lives. And for them to be able to witness that. And we did it imperfectly, obviously, but just showing up every single day and doing the things we were committed to say to them, this is the most important thing there is. And so that translated to every part of our day, for them just to see us trying to live our lives in the Lord daily through miscarriages, tight finances, marital struggles. They were all, at different ages when our parents began to die, and dealing with that suffering and that next stage of life, and caring for aging parents, all of that in the very simple ways that sometimes we take for granted, but is so important in today's culture. We stayed married. Sounds so obvious, we're saying that in a Catholic church.
Took a lot of convincing to keep her around, but we did it.
And not like we were ever, but we all know that over 50% of couples don't stay married. So the witness of just staying married and staying in the trenches together was a huge witness for our children to say, this is what married people do. they stay married no matter what, and they remain faithful to one another. Having meals together, being present to our children, and being around when they decided they were going to talk or open up about something. Loving and serving one another. Reserving and preserving our times of disagreement away from the children, so that everything that we were struggling with and discerning and deciding wasn't just open game for the whole family. And then I'd say lastly, just a willingness to acknowledge with them in the appropriate ways our own weaknesses and mistakes, and modeling for them what it means to ask forgiveness to one another and to them as well. So much about just trying to model and witness to it rather than always preaching and teaching about what that looks like. And I want to say now, I think I said this before, 3 of our 4 children are married, and they're raising their own families now. I remember, again, our children each wrote us a letter on their wedding day, really thanking us for helping them really become disciples. And that was the terms they used. Not thank you for making me a better person or a good citizen, but thank you for helping me know Jesus and becoming a disciple and helping me be the man that I am today, or the woman that I am today. My daughter's husband, a wonderful man, but he didn't know that you could know Jesus in a personal way, and we've watched his life in the last 8 years. He's come to a very, very deep conversion with the Lord and is so hungry for him. And again, my daughter being able to model that in her own life has been a beautiful thing. I remember maybe a year ago, I got a text from my daughter-in-law one morning very early, and she said, I just want to thank you for the way you raised Mike. She said, I'm standing here in the kitchen very early in the morning nursing a baby, and Mike is sitting in a chair taking his prayer time, just like his dad did. And she said, I just want to thank you. It means so much that he's such a wonderful father and a husband, and he really loves Jesus. And finally...
Yeah, she actually said in the text, we were both getting up. They live in the Twin Cities, so they're an hour even earlier than us. And it was like 5:45 or something. She said, I'm standing in the kitchen crying. I thought, I wonder what that means, in the text. And she goes, I'm crying because I'm looking at Michael, and I'm so grateful for him. And the fact that he just each day quietly is pursuing the Lord and leading our family and just seeing him pray. And then he's there and the kids are up in about 45 minutes or something and they're jumping on him. And it was just, I was one of the most blessed things I ever heard, to tell you the honest truth, just to say, because he would never say that. I had zero idea that was happening in his life, And it was just good to see. It was really good to hear. It was a real gift.
And then a few weeks later, she takes a picture of their 2-year-old son, who's sitting in the corner of the couch just with the Bible open, pretending that he's reading and praying. So he's modeling exactly what his dad has seen, and his dad is modeling what he has seen in his own father. And so then we begin to realize that legacy is not just through our own children, but it's the next generation beyond that. So just to conclude with one really moving story that happened to me, when my granddaughter Audrey, who's now 8, was 3 or 4 years old.
First grandchild.
Grandchild. She had been allowed to come to Pine Hills Camp when she was really little because her mom was on staff. And so that's the camp that I run for junior high girls. And we were walking around camp together hand in hand, and she was so delighted to be there. And she stopped me and she said, Grandma, I just figured out why you made this camp. And I said, oh, really? Why, Audrey? And she goes, you made it for me. And she said, when I get bigger, I'm going to be a camper here. Well, she already thought she was a camper there at 3. And I'm going to be a counselor someday. And all my cousins are going to be in my cabin. And someday I'm going to be leading this camp. That's the generational principle of what we do now today in our life as parents has the potential to get passed on from generation to generation. What we're building now has lasting, eternal impact. And honestly, there's nothing more significant that we can be doing with our lives than what we're doing, asked to be doing as parents and grandparents, family members, confirmation sponsors, all the way that we're pouring into our children's life to really create a family. So we're going to close. Peter's going to close with a prayer from Scripture.
And then two quick things.
Yeah, then we'll open it up.
When we were thinking about our journey, I'd say, every stage, one of the constants in our life has been a priest, has been priests. whether it's baptisms, confirmations, coming into our home for dinners, blessing our homes, hearing our confessions occasionally, a couple times at home. But I remember when I was a child, lived a block away from the cathedral, when a priest came to visit, all the china came out, and it was a big deal. And it's the one time I remember my dad training me, like how to appropriately welcome somebody. When I was a little boy, he goes, now when we had to dress, who comes in, he goes, look him in the eye and shake his hand and firmly shake his hand and welcome him into the house. But the priests and their presence have been with us all along the way to forgive our sins, to help us pursue God, to bring the sacraments, to bless our homes and all that. Big deal. Really very, very important piece of it. So I invite you to, I know priests are busy and they can't go to everybody's, they can't go out to eat every night, they'll get too heavy, but they invite them to your house at some point. Have them bless your house and have them be a part of your life. I just want to end with this passage from Ephesians. For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you may be strengthened in your inner being with power through his Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you are being now rooted and grounded in love, which is what we try to do. Each day try to root and ground our life in love. I pray that you may have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of God that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now to him who by the power of work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus and in our families and to all generations forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, that's all we got. I mean, we got more, but that's all the time. So
Short
we really
night.
want to, open it up for more conversation or questions.
Thank you so much, Peter and Debbie. That was
course.
awesome. Okay, here we go. This is a long one. It's from Sean. He's got a lot of words. Okay. Because of online learning, many of our young people are even more connected to their phones or computers for education. How can we get our children to avoid being pulled into the unhealthy world available to them via computers or their phones or other technology?
I think you have to be, you as a parent, and first of all, as a couple, you have to be together on these issues that you have to tackle that are difficult. You have to be one heart and one mind, okay? And then you have to realize that just like when we were young and I was totally into music or something that I wasn't supposed to be listening to, and I didn't want to let it go, and my parents, needed to make some decision about what I was going to listen to or not. Here we are in a totally different situation that's very challenging. So we have to say, we're in a battle that my child maybe doesn't understand, but I still have to build boundaries. I have to make those decisions. I'm not going to yield to the emotions of my child. I'm not going to yield to if they get mad at me. We're going to make decisions together, my husband and I, initially to say, what do we think needs to happen? How much is our child using this media? Are we aware of what our child is doing with media? Is there any accountability whatsoever with them? Do we have any kind of filters on our media to protect them for pornography and all kinds of stuff that's out there? Have we had those kinds of conversations? Are we working together on that? And then back to the why question. We want to set boundaries, but we have to help our kids understand why we're making the decisions that we're making. They don't always have to agree with us, but it helps to know the why. And that means we have to do a little homework. That's why I was recommending this book and stuff like this, because this kind of person, even though they'll want to resist it, they'll be credible witnesses because they're not churchy people, they're not Catholics, this is a secular genius from Silicon Valley. And he's talking about what's happening. It's staggering what he reveals in here about what they know for sure scientifically is happening to the brains and the habits and the life of kids. And so help them come into this and have conversation with them. Again, age appropriate, in terms of how much you can talk and how much they can understand. So, Deb?
I'd also say this is not a youth phenomenon, this is a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Every single adult, for the most part, under 70 maybe, is on their phones as well. And so again, it's about being a credible witness and a model. The kids at home will not do anything different about their phones or even obey your rules if they see you having a whole different standard for your phone. And I just see it a lot, you know, when I'm working with high school girls, that their parents are on their phones, you know, just as much as the kids are. And so I think that's a problem. I think we're an age of technology, and this is the way that we communicate, and this is primarily what we use is screens. So I think it's a bigger problem than just our kids, for sure. But I think it's maybe starts with the awareness of parents. How am I using media? How much am I attached to my phone? Am I able to leave my phone in the kitchen when I go to bed and not having it by my bedside? I think for parents to be starting to be challenged to say, what habits can I begin to have in my own life before I demand them of my kids?
I mean, when our kids were growing up, computers were appearing, you know, so we had the small computers, and then before laptops came, and then we put a computer kind of in a central, not the central place where like of a room, but in a room where there's traffic all the time. Instead of having it in their bedroom or having it in a place where they can shut the door, where the temptations can happen. So they could do their homework there, they could do the things that they need to do, but it's always out there and it's in the open. We have to help them.
Well, phones have changed all that, though.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm saying that was then, but now we have to be able to say, okay, what are we going to do with this thing that they can take everywhere, a phone? We're going to take it and we're going to, no phones in the bedroom at night, right? We're going to turn off our phones during dinner. No one's going to answer their phones. We're going to have conversations. Maybe key times during the year, we're going to fast like during Lent. You know, we're going to help them instead of saying, stop eating this food or that food. You know what the biggest sacrifice might be is literally to shut down your Facebook for 30 days. You know, you can do it temporarily. Shut those things down for a few days and learn how to fast, because that can be a teaching moment for them to say, this will show you how deep this is in you and how habitually you're looking for those dopamine hits all the time to kind of go to your phone every time your phone moves, and to let your internal life settle down and to have it over a period of time. Then they get a taste of a little bit more freedom and peace in times like that. But that's what that's the church's wisdom and just fasting, period, you know, what that's all about. So, that makes sense? Do you have any other things we might be missing? You guys could teach this as well as we could. So, no? Okay, Stacy?
How important are family meals together? Why? And then how did you make
That's super important. I mean, if you think about your kids, I mean, it's a little different now because of kids being at home more and doing online learning or whatever. But even then, you're relating to a screen. You're not relating to each other. So I think to know that we had time carved out every day when we're coming back together as a family, a place for the kids just to get refreshed and strengthened, even if it was just for having a good meal together. I mean, for the sake of having a good meal together, a time to check in with one another, for us to hear how they were doing, to slow down their life a bit and reconnect to the source. Super important. And it helped us keep track of them and what they were doing. So that was, for much of their life, was pretty much a non-negotiable. When they were younger, before like high school, we actually, as we said, would have a meal together on a Saturday evening, like a Lord's Day or a Sabbath meal together. So.
But we had it other nights of the week too. It wasn't like the only night.
Every single night we would have dinner together, and then maybe like Sunday nights would be a little bit more casual, but really that was primarily important. And I think, again, kids are so busy and there's so many activities, it usually is the first thing that I think goes.
I had an experience the other day when one of my boys lives in Plymouth with his wife, and they invited us over for dinner. And so we went, and he was a former military guy and big guy. And I saw him, I hadn't seen him for a number of weeks, and we gave each other a hug, and I looked into his eyes, and he said, we were leaving, I said, I love you, Josh. And I remembered back when they were little. Every night when they were little, we used to pray over them, and we just put a hand over their head and say, the Lord bless you and keep you, the prayer of Aaron from the Old Testament, and look them in the eyes. I said, what I was telling them, look into my eyes, I want to look into your eyes. The Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you and watch over you and give you his peace. Something that simple, and then it always was followed by a kiss and I love you. You know what I mean? To embrace them. So every day they get at least, that happens at least one time. And your eyes connect, the window to the soul, and you're looking into each other and you're speaking faith, you're speaking love into each other. I think it's really, really an important thing. It's so simple, but it's really important to do. So.
Thank you for your witness, in a particular way, Peter, because what you mentioned about men not always being willing to take that role of spiritual leadership, you clearly did, obviously in partnership with Debbie. But you know this, and I know this, that a lot of men are reluctant.
Yeah.
And a lot of wives long for their husbands to be spiritual leaders. Part of that is the work of the parish to help men begin to know their faith, to own their faith, to talk about their faith among men. The question I would have is, what would you encourage women to do and not to do to help their husbands become the leaders they long for them to be?
Yes, committee?
Okay. Both of you.
Both of us. Okay, yeah, I think, Peter's wisdom, St. Peter's wisdom in the New Testament, what does he say, Father? He said that, pray, model, love, be patient, and make sure that you're sharing from your heart at the right times what you hope could happen as a couple. And also sometimes women can be very, very smart and intuitive, and maybe know some of my friends, for example, because our couples, we know each other, and there might be a guy among that friendship group who just has a greater comfort zone in being able to be a spiritual leader in his house. And they might say, hey, would you mind talking to Peter sometime about, kind of how you do things, what you do, or as couples, let's talk about it. Because guys will, my experience with guys is that in leading spiritually in their home, even if they're leading like a little men's group or so they're asked to do it, is if they know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they have a pretty good indication that what they're going to do is going to be basically successful, they'll step into it. But if they feel like they don't quite know what they're doing, they won't do it. Most of the time, they won't step into it, And so I would say having other guys reach them and say, come and let me show you how to do this. And I'd say, I would try to create a culture of that in the parish among men, older men, other men who have gifts to help guys, mentor guys, because once guys get it, once guys come into it, they love it. They really do. Once they start reading the Bible, talking about the Bible, sharing it, praying with their kids, oh man, this never happened in my life growing up. And I'm so glad somebody helped me do this. This is awesome. I love this, So they need help though usually. Most guys don't just read a book and make it happen. They need some mentoring, they need modeling, they need conversation, they need friendship, they need push, they need, all that. So.
Anybody else in the church have a question?
What advice would you give to parents in dealing with modesty?
With modesty, okay.
Yes, I mostly can say stuff on the girls' end because we have girls and boys, obviously, but I've dealt more with girls. I think modesty is incredibly important to help young people, boys and girls in different ways, understand the beauty of their own bodies and their own sexuality and all that. So I think sometimes we, overreact to the way the culture does it, and we just say, cover up everything, and that doesn't help, I think, especially if our kids are, they have to live in the world. But I think, again, the why, helping them as they get older, understanding the why. We held our ground on a lot of things, in terms of standards of modesty for our children.
What you could wear out of the house and what you couldn't wear out of the house. Yeah,
exactly. And we wanted them to understand why, and to understand the rationale behind it. And there were some good, lively conversations as our kids got older about that, especially the girls understanding, why you can't wear this and how a guy's going to respond to what you're wearing and not. But I think starting at a young age, with them and just helping them do that has been really, really helpful. I think our kids got it for the most part. I don't remember a whole lot.
Going to the schools they went to helped,
and
they
were in Catholic
others
schools,
had to do
so they
that.
had to wear
the whole idea
uniforms
isn't there been hundreds of years of Catholic education where girls want to lift the dread? They have these outfits. What do you call them? That they wear.
Kilts.
Yeah, kilts, but yeah. And then, they're supposed to be at the knee, and then
uniform.
before you know it, halfway up, the principal or somebody sees them in the hall and says, hey, that's 2 inches too high. Bring that back down. I don't know if that still happens, but every generation there's those kinds of temptations and stuff. But and celebrate modesty. Celebrate it, and have them meet beautiful people, beautiful women who are full of dignity, men who are carrying themselves with the right kind of dignity that can be a model and be in your life. And it's just something, again, it's like the air they breathe. It's like they admire these people. This is what they look like. They discover that beauty doesn't have to be, doesn't have to show off things that are inappropriate to show off or something, but you carry yourself with dignity and a certain kind of class and beauty. If you honor, remember that you're building a culture. What's a culture? A culture is a way of life. It's the way of life of this house, of this family, which is connected to other families that's building a way of life. At the center of that way of life is a person, and that person is Jesus. So we're trying to build a way of life around Jesus, and a culture communicates what do we value? What do we honor? What do we reward? Ask yourselves, what are our speech, the things that we elevate, the things that we honor, is it consistent with the culture that we're trying to build? And so it's one of the coolest things about this whole journey, and it's hard because we can beat each other up or beat ourselves up because we feel like we fail so much as human beings, and the devil likes to beat us up. But it's really fun to just apply our minds to the creative process of creating a culture in your own home that's based on your faith, but also your amazing personalities, your differences, your talents, your dreams, your family history, all that kind of stuff that the Lord might want to redeem along the way. Part of that culture might be the Lord redeeming and healing some of your past family history and creating something new for the next generations, So
this is a good tag team experience, maybe if I would take one of my high school teenage daughters out, or preteen, to get a bathing suit, which is a really good example. This is very detailed, but this is real life here. And she'd say, she'd try it on, and she'd say, I think it's fine. I'm like, not sure. She goes, no, it's fine. I said, okay, we're gonna take it home and you're gonna try it on for your dad. And if he doesn't think it's fine, it's definitely not fine. And so we kind of supported one another in that, and then he was usually the final, no, you're not leaving, you're not going out in that. So we did that a lot.
Yeah, and I think the reality of mom and dad, male, female, and for a father to help a young daughter understand that she's beautiful, and that you just speak and relate to her in a way that she can grow in confidence in who she is. Because a lot of times girls, I think today in the culture, get signals all the time. That you have to dress and look this way if you want boys to be interested in you. You have to act this way. And they're insecure and they're fearful. They want to be, loved. They want to be recognized. They want someone to care for them. They want all this stuff to happen in their life. And the less dad's involved in their life, the more that's going to become a predominant thing for them and a controlling factor in their life. It's always a both and, but I think there's just a unique way. I was surprised at how important it is for a dad all through the junior high and high school years to be present to her and to guard her dignity, to protect her. When she went to homecoming and things like that, I sat down with the boys, each boy she went to homecoming with, and I said, here's the deal, glad you're doing it, but here's how I'm expecting you to relate to her and how to treat her. And if I hear that this isn't the case, I'm coming to your house and I'm going to break your knees, okay? Just to let you know. You know what I mean? Just something funny like that. But they got the message, because she's precious to me. And I'm going to do whatever I can, right? For her to be able to know that throughout her life. And I'm not going to have some insecure, crazy young teenage guy who can't control himself wreck her life in different ways, So I have to be vigilant. And if it's, a couple times my daughter thought I was a little teeny bit overbearing, like, Dad, why did you say that? Because she found out later. But she lived through it. Now she's glad I said it, at the time. So.
And I would say on the flip side of raising boys, really teaching them how to respect women. So important. I see this a lot in today with young men in the high school setting or junior high. They are very disrespectful of girls and women, and I think the culture is teaching them that, and they're not getting it at home, and they're not seeing it modeled at home. But as importantly for young men, and that sometimes is modeled with the husband and wife relationship for starters, but to teach our boys how to respect their sisters, for starters, how to respect one another. One of the things we did in our home was we never allowed our kids to say shut up to each other. I mean, they did it and they got disciplined for it, but there were just certain ways they were not allowed to relate to one another out of disrespect, because we knew that that would carry out beyond the home. And so, you know, I know the boys didn't do it perfectly, but outside the home, but I think overall they really were, you know, very respectful of the other girls or the women in their lives. And
you can't be on them for everything all the time, so you got to pick the key things that are going to be the line in the sand, and that boom, you're going to respond to it without compromise, consistently. They know it's coming. You talked about how you were going to handle it. That's exactly how you do it. So you're not doing it too much, because it's going to be overwhelming for them. You know, they're imperfect creatures just like us. But you got to have enough of those markers in their life where they feel the substitution of a father and a mother's will, a mature will for the immature will that they have. Parenting aims at its own extinction, its own extinction. You want to eventually have them be self-movers that are moving from the resources within. And so you have to have those moments of their requiring of them certain growth without being on their case for everything, you know? So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have a question? I didn't see anybody. Okay. So thank you so much, Peter and Debbie. I'm going to pass it over to Father Steve for a final blessing.
All right. Okay, once again, this book, as Father's coming up, 10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now. And it was, it's only like $7, I think I got this thing for, on Amazon. It's totally worth it, I'm telling you. Get this book, you'll be glad you did. Simple read, smart book. So.
Let's thank Peter and Debbie once again for their witness and their words tonight.